Well, very good evening, everyone. As Mr. Drew spins around out of shot, it is a great pleasure to be with you this evening for the Studio Rats Q&A Live, number 175. My name's Paul. My name's not Paul Drew. My name's James Ivy.
I'm Paul Drew, and we're joined today by
down there.
What's going on? Taylor Cox from Amplified Nation.
oh, we got a guest today.
Pleasure to have you with us, Taylor. Taylor is going to, we'll get into questions and stuff like that later. Just a quick heads up of how this evening's going to go. We will do the news and all the normal stuff, but we won't be doing all the heads up type stuff and the hellos and the shout outs and all that stuff, because I want to say we've got Taylor for a certain amount of time, and we want to, quite frankly, drill down into his knowledge. He is here to answer your questions as well, either on Amplified Nation stuff or on amps and tubes and setups and things like that, and anything, guitar-y, ampy related. We've got some stuff we want to get through and stuff. Discuss. Go, guys.
Well done, James. So I want to ask, first of all, because I know this story because I've seen a couple of your interviews that you've done with other channels and stuff, but just for the audience and for James, because James doesn't know, can you just explain how the whole Amplified Nation thing started and where, how you got to today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long story. I mean, we started a long time ago, 2009. I wasn't making a ton of money at work and started doing like some buying and selling of guitar gear on Craigslist. I was making a little bit of cash here and there. And I ran into a guy that had a bunch of tolex, and he said, "Hey, man, if you want, you can actually rewrap people's guitar amps, change the color." And I was like, "Really? I mean, that's awesome." I'd been running around buying and selling speakers and like old Gibson amps, and all of a sudden I was like, "Wait, this is something I can just do, and offer a service." So my wife and I started a website, and I literally just like put up a Craigslist ad and say, "Hey, I'll re-tolex your amp if you want to change the color." So I was doing that and some like Marshall restorations and Fender restorations. People would bring me like an old Bassman that was banged up, and we rewrap it, make it look new again. So I did that for a little while, and it was great, man. I was making like $100 a week, and like it was just like really satisfying. Like I felt like I was getting to know kind of guitar amps and things like that. But I felt like I wanted to start creating more. So a couple of years later, I started doing custom cabinets. And I found a group of guys on the internet at the Amp Garage that were building trainwrecks and Dumbles, and they had like no one that was doing the woodworking. So these guys were like, trying to put cabinets together in the garage after they built an amp. And I said, "Hey, maybe I can figure this out." So I got some books from the library and basically just like figured out woodworking and started making my own cabinets. And after a while, we were building cabinets for the Dumble style stuff, for the trainwreck stuff. And people would send me the Two Rocks, Bluto Tones, Welligans. Eventually, as people started sending me real Dumbles. And I got all this experience, like basically playing all those great amps, and started developing an ear for it. And I was like, you know what? I should just start building my own amps. So around 2011, 2012, basically started an amp company. And was doing really low numbers, a couple here and there on the websites like the gear page. And it started taking off. And we were just kind of doing, one-offs, really like, mostly Dumble style stuff like the Overdrive special, or we did a clean channel of the kind of a copy of the John Mayer signature amp. Mm-hmm. And as we kind of, developed this brand, my wife and I, figured out some really great ways to market it, and developed our own, 5 or 6 different models of amps. And it's just kind of grown since then. It's amazing. Now we've got a few employees. We got in a commercial space, and we've been selling a lot of amps.
So did you have any electronics background before you started building amps?
I did not. I learned literally everything from the internet and from real life experience. I got some books from like the, Gerald Weber and like all these guys write kind of like tube amp essentials. Mm-hmm. And there's some other books like Martin Blenkow. And I really got like books from the library about electricity and just figured out like kind of how it was to move around and just cross-reference that with like a lot of experience with guitar amps.
Because valve stroke tube technology is not something that you generally jump into. I remember at university, there were guys building solid state amps because they wouldn't let us touch tubes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I mean, it's definitely dangerous, right? Like there's high voltage and stuff like that. But, once you figure out your way around it, and you can literally watch the electricity, leave the amp. And if you're careful and stuff and follow, good safety practices, it's not terribly dangerous. But it's an older technology, right? So it hasn't really developed much. So like, obviously there's new features and, power scaling and things like that people put now into modern amps. But overall, like when you're looking at a tube amp, it's technology from the 60s and it hasn't really changed, right? So like, it's kind of got like a finite box to it where you're like, man, like I can actually learn all there is to know about this because it's not developing. You know what I mean? So you can read resources from the 60s and they still apply exactly the same way, today in 2023.
That's amazing. So, well, have you ever done yourself any disservice by touching the wrong thing? You must have done in
yeah, I've got shocked a bunch of times. Oh my God. You got like 400 volts of DC across your hand. Yeah, there's been a few times. You can protect yourself from like the wall, from the electricity coming out of the wall. There's like ground fault, outlets and stuff like that. But yeah, man, like if there's a fully charged capacitor, like, that electricity's got to go somewhere.
Gee, that's scary.
And you are the shortest route to ground.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So when you were re-tolexing and then, tolexing people's Dumbles, what was the process of you, like opening up a Dumble and then saying, right, I'm gonna build this? Is it literally you have to go through all the different sort of signal path to exactly? I mean, that's the whole thing. But for a guy that did or that hasn't had any electronics background, that must have been like really hard work.
I mean, when you start as an amp builder, like a lot of it is kind of like a paint by numbers thing. Like you can get schematics and layouts off of the internet and literally just, if you can solder, like, you can put it together. You can buy a kit and, it's pretty well documented how it goes together. So that's kind of how I got started. There's a website, like I mentioned, the Amp Garage, that has a lot of layouts on Dumble style stuff. And at the time, back in 2010, 2011, it was like flourishing. It was a really busy website. There was a great community of people. It's not the way it's not that way now. But at the time, man, like it was a busy place. And there's a lot of like sexiness to the Dumble style stuff, right? There's like secretism. They're super high priced amps. He was very selective with who he did business with. And the designs were all gooped. They would put in epoxy so you couldn't tell what was in there. And so the guys that like got the information, it was like they had this like all the secrets, right? And I just became kind of like so intrigued by this mystical world, right? That I, really dove in, and those were the first amps that I really got to know. So after you build a bunch of those like, Overdrive special amps, you find out that they all kind of have a pretty specific pattern to them. They're simple amps. They got a preamp and they got a power amp. And he used to change the amps a lot. So like not every Overdrive special is the same, but overall, like they kind of have the same topology. So you become really familiar with that. And then when you are reverse engineering it, you can be like, all right, like I already know 80% of this before I even take it out of the box, and then you take it out and you see what components might be different. Right. So like you can cross-reference a lot of stuff with the stuff on the internet. You can hear some stuff with your ears. And of course, like you can go through the amp and you can, test parts and things like that and read resistor values or, find capacitor codes. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but it's not that complicated.
Because I heard that, well, you're right. There is all this sort of mystique around the Dumble, how he chose people that he wanted to work for and all that sort of stuff. And I heard, and I did hear recently that there was some friend of his, and he said, oh, he just used to get his components from Maplins. We would call it Maplins, but whatever your Radio Shack.
Radio Shack
was. Yeah, and you just go like, it's just, you know, all of this mystique has been built up around this brand.
Yep.
And you know, the amp itself, I mean, what's the highest Dumble, you know,
I've heard as
sales?
high as like 750,000. I think Kirk Hammett sold a Steel String Singer a couple years ago for over 500 grand. I know, it's wild. You know, so I had a couple of them. You know, there was a couple times when people needed a new cabinet for their Dumble and like really didn't want to do all the measurements and stuff. So they would just send it to me, you know, put it in a road case and like overnight it. And so I got to experience those amps sometimes for a few weeks at a time. And they did sound really good. Like I had number 38, which I think was like a 1978 or 1979 Dumble Overdrive special. And it sounded absolutely magical. Like it was like things were coming out of the amp I never heard before. And I went through and I was like, there must be something secret in this amp that like isn't on the internet, because there's layouts for that generation Dumble. And literally the layout online was exactly the same. And I'm like, man, I've built this amp 100 times and it's never sounded like this one. And I went through and it was completely ungooped. And a lot of the parts in there were like crazy old NOS stuff, or I mean, it wasn't NOS, but it was older components from like the 70s, you know, filled with like Pyre resistors or vintage orange drops, MEPCO resistors. And it's stuff you cannot get anymore. Like it's not available, you know, and I think there's some magic to those old components and, you know, how he linked them together and his choice of what went with what. But I also think the aging and like how those components drift over time, you know, really made some of those amps sound super special.
It's a bit like when people talk about vintage microphones. They say, oh, I've got a vintage matched pair of U67s from 1960 something. Yeah, well, you haven't, because exactly what you've just said, component drift. And even when those mics were brand new, they probably had 10-15% either way tolerances on the components.
Yeah, definitely. They're all a little bit different.
Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, components age. Some age well, some not so well.
Yeah, definitely.
What was Dumble's wiring like and soldering like? Was it? I just imagine it's absolutely pristine, and I want to hear now. It was a bit shabby, and this bit was a bit shabby.
It depends on the amp. So that one that I saw from the 70s, it was incredibly well built. It was built like you could drop it off a building. All the components were completely wrapped. Wow. There was tie points in places that I hadn't seen before. Something I do in my amps is add PM inserts, which is like hardware that's actually installed onto the chassis at the metal shop. And I thought that I was the only person that did that. Dumble was doing it in the 70s. Yeah, so that one was built really well. I've seen some other ones. I had an Ultraphonics and Gain for a while too. That was a little sloppy, but it still sounded great.
Right.
You know, so, you know, some of those old Fenders too, like they were just built, like the wires are all wrapped and stuff like that. And they still sounded awesome. So, you know, I don't think it's always lead dress, but knowing where to place the wires is definitely a important thing to keep your noise floor down, at least, you know?
Oh, amazing.
I think that's the thing that we found with the more, you know, we've gone through the standard stuff, the Marshalls and kind of Fenders and stuff. And when you get to, you know, the higher, I suppose it's almost the higher value amps like yours, like the sort of matchless type stuff. It's not necessarily the sound, because the sound is, as we all know, so much of it is the player. Yeah. But it's the noise, as in the noise floor. We you know, when we've cranked Marshalls, you get an amazing noise, but you also get whereas so the really beautifully built higher spec, I suppose the generic phrase is boutique amps, don't do that. They don't have that horrendous noise floor that something like a Marshall JCM 800 or 900 would have when it's cranked.
Yeah, I think that's a really important like aspect to building a great amp is having the noise floor almost next to nothing. I feel like hum or hiss in an amp, especially when you're sitting in front of it, or maybe it's late at night and you can't play super loud. I feel like it just absolutely ruins the experience. You know,
yeah.
So all of our amps are dead quiet. Like, you know,
it is amazing, because James came around today. The first time he's ever tried one of your amps was today, You didn't try the Amplifiers and gain, did you? When I had that combo?
No, I didn't see that one. No.
So yeah, we plugged it in, and we had a lot of gain going through it, and it's even with single coils, it's ridiculously quiet. It's eerily quiet.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Is it on?"
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's on. You know, hang on, but we've got it cranked. It's making that big rock and roll noise, and yet nothing. No background noise. No nothing. I was like,
yeah.
We
have 150 watt steel string singer, and even that, where it'll hiss a little bit because it's just so powerful. If you just walk by it, it's hard to even tell it's on, and it might be at a volume that would tear your head off.
Wow. I would love to try one. Yeah, I'd love to try one of them. But your build quality is like, I've never seen an amp that's the attention to detail just on the aesthetics even is unbelievable. I mean, I've had like Matchless, and you know, James and myself have had some really high-end amps, and there's always something you go, oh, that's not great, or that's not great. There is nothing you can look on this amp. It's a work of art. It's an absolute work of art.
Yeah, we've made that one of our core values is really just attention to detail. It's so important in every aspect of business. I mean, not just the amp, but getting all the details right? Like making sure that the amp gets there okay with shipping, and make sure we don't make any mistakes on color or aesthetics, or, you know, the preamp that we're using or anything like that. So the attention to detail, it's a non-negotiable thing here. And I think you can see that in probably both the amps that you had. We really try to put a product out that's perfect.
So we had a question. Someone put in a question earlier, and I can't remember where we got it. I think it was it might have been from last week, or maybe when we put out the announcement that we were doing this today. Someone said, would you ever consider doing something like the Friedman IRX, where you have like your amp in a tabletop box, or an amp top box, or a pedal sort of form, where it's not necessarily hasn't got the power amp section, but it's a sort of preamp section?
Yeah, I've thought about that before. I've had a lot of people ask me to put the preamp into like a rack unit, and I thought that would be cool. You know, I'm not sure if it still is, but I feel like at one point in the past couple of years, the rack stuff seemed to be coming back, and I was like, it would be really fun to be able just to throw a preamp into a rack unit. You know, and maybe you'd combine that with like an effects loop, like some sort of buffered loop, and then into a power amp. I've thought about it, you know, and there's so many guys now that are playing late at night at home, and they're using like devices like the aux box or some sort of like digital load, where they really want to have like a, you know, ultra quiet environment, or maybe no noise at all. And I think it would be really cool to have a product like that.
Yeah. Go on, James. Go on.
So I was just saying, I'm very fortunate that out here I can make, well, and Paul and I have cranked amps up, you know, 100-watt Marshalls up to full tilt, and you go outside and it's like, nope, nothing. So it is quite nice to be able to do that these days, and have bands and stuff on. But I appreciate that not everyone's in that very desirable position. But, you know, I mean, just playing through the amp today, I went. And I'm not first call guitar player, as many people will test. Many people on the channel will know, but just playing through it, I went, it feels right. It's not just tone; it's the feel of the amp. You know, you want to play more. You want to play through it, and I'm not sure I can explain that. I'm not even sure how.
No, it's inspiring, and it's reactive. It's very very reactive. Which I think we should talk about is can you go through? And I don't know how long this will take, but can you go through the different models that you've got and just give us a quick?
Yeah, sure.
Before you do, I just want to say, for anyone who joined later on, our guest down there is Taylor Cox from Amplified Nation. Tim said, "Who does this guy build for?" And I'm like, he doesn't build for. He is Amplified Nation.
I love the way that Richard Paul has said, is that Ryan Reynolds? I'd definitely take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
I got Bill Burger, which I wasn't happy about.
Yeah, so we have 7 models. we've they all kind of do something different. They all do some great stuff. There's some overlap with some of the models, but they all kind of have a unique voice. So I'll start out with the first model that we have is the Dirty Wonderland. Dirty Wonderland is one of the first amps that we came out with, and it is our version of the John Mayer Signature, the amp that he was playing on the Continuum tour in 2007. Beautiful amp. And, it does have kind of our own spin on it and some added features. And I think over the years we've kind of taken the build kind of in our own direction. But it does this great early 80s Dumble clean tone. It has a huge reverb on board. And it's great for people that want to like play right on the edge of breakup. Like guys that maybe don't want a high gain amp, that really, value clean tones. Maybe they're throwing pedals at it. But absolutely fantastic amp, something that you could just sit with all day and play clean and never feel like you needed to switch over to the drive channel to connect with the amp. That amp was really popular, but a lot of guys, did want the channel switching onto the amp. So we came out with an amp shortly after called the Wonderland Overdrive. And that has that same kind of like Mayer early 80s Dumble clean sound with a throaty, medium to high gain overdrive channel added. We retain the reverb. It has some really great features like half power, super easy to set up, but Swiss Army knife of an amp, does anything from great cleans to an aggressive throaty overdrive, compatible with basically every guitar style, voiced well for strats, which not a lot of Dumbles are. But that's been a great amp for us. Definitely one of our more popular models. We had also guys that kind of wanted something more true to the Dumble Overdrive Special topology. So something that was really bare bones, Overdrive Special, clean, and overdrive. And so many people, love that Robin Ford tone. So we have an amp called the Bombshell Overdrive, which is just that. It's our version of the Overdrive Special. It has the high plate Skyliner voicing in it. So it's real kind of chirpy and honky, does like the saxophone thing. It's a little compressed, has a, maybe a slight saturation, very, very similar to Robin's tone. Great amp, but bare bones, no reverb. It does have an FET input, which is great, but fantastic sounding amp. Then we have Overdrive Reverb, which came out in 2020, and that's our version of the Dumble Overdrive Reverb. Santana is known for playing that amp. Lowell George, Bonnie Raitt had one. I think Jackson Brown played one as well, and it's a fantastic amp. That's what you have, Paul, and you've just reviewed it.
I was just trying to switch over to my camera, but it won't. For some reason, it won't switch. Yes.
Yeah, but it's just an amazing amp. It does, again, the beautiful cleans, throaty overdrive, and it has this enormous reverb built in. The reverb is just perfect. It's balanced well. It kind of gets out of the way when you want it to. That amp is just filled with great tones. It's got a little bit more brilliance than the other amps in our lineup, and it's built in a larger style head box. But it's been an absolute monster for us.
It is absolutely enormous, that thing as well. I mean, it's massive.
A big amp. Yeah, it's a big amp. It's got 6 preamp tubes, so it really takes up a lot of real estate inside.
Right. 6 preamps. Wow.
Yep. And then we have the Steel String Singer, which is our version of the Dumble Steel String Singer, made famous by guys like John Mayer, Stevie Ray Vaughan. That is a very high output but clean amplifier, where it's really strong and robust and very percussive, and kind of has all the attributes of an overdriven amp, but without the overdrive. So you get kind of like a clean sustain, a lot of touch sensitivity. You can hear kind of everything going on in your guitar. Great, fantastic, really fun amp to play. Excuse me. We have an amp also called the Ampliphonics in Gain, which I know, Paul, you've done another review on. Fantastic video that you did for us. That amp is modeled after Dumble Ultraphonics, which was a modded Fender that is kind of well known for being the best Fender clean you've ever heard. It's got a little bit more I wouldn't say like it's aggressive, but you can get it to break up a little bit sooner than like a Fender Bassman. It'll really do some magical things when you push it. And that amp also has a very high gain Marshall Plexi channel on it. So it's really kind of the best of both worlds when you're looking for something that's both Fender and Marshall, where you can get these great basement cleans. They're crisp, they're clear, and you can switch over and get literally like any plexi tone imaginable. Stuff from the 70s, 80s, 90s. You can get Soldano. It'll really do a lot of things. So that's a really great amp. And then we have the Trem Drive, and the Trem Drive is a new amp. We came out with it in May of 23, so it's been out for just a few months, and that's our version of the Dumble Overdrive Deluxe. So he had modded a deluxe reverb with, it stayed single channel and it retained the reverb in the trem, but Dumble put a really cool kind of high gain single channel onto it. So it'll do some great kind of like Fender clean tones, but it'll also, you know, you can get that thing cranked up and it'll do some really cool gain stuff. And it's really fun with the trem.
Yeah, that's got trem. Nice. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's all of them. I hope I didn't forget any.
Can't forget your babies.
A few questions have come in, and I'm going to put them in down there. Friend of the show, Clive's been in touch.
Nice.
Yeah, Clive says, tell Taylor I'll be in touch when my other amp is sold. I think, yeah. So funny story about Clive actually, that we James and myself, we went over to Clive's house about a year and a half ago, maybe.
About that,
and, yeah. Clive's got some fantastic. He's got like an original 59 and a 57 Les Paul that we went down to shoot a video on, and he had a collection of Dumble style amplifiers. We had a red plate and a 2-rock and a Fuchs, I think was the other one.
Yeah,
that was the first time that I'd ever sort of tried that Dumble flavor. And yeah, so I know Clive now is looking at getting. I think Clive's a bit of a Dumble fan, and he's looking at getting one of yours. So.
And it's not a bad way to try those amps with some vintage Les Pauls.
Oh
yeah. It was definitely it was one of those days that will go in the the guitar red letter day book and go, yes, big tick.
Fun day, wasn't it? It was a fun day. We got questions.
Tim Brown says, "What does everyone think about Mesobarba?
Mesobarba.
I always think it sounds like Hanna-Barbera, but it's not."
Dude, I don't know. I'll take like any excuse to listen to Eric Steckel riffs on Instagram. So he crushes those amps.
Yeah, I always find all of their stuff is just a bit ultra high gain for me, and I like that. But I want something that I can push to that higher gain as opposed to it being just a high gain amp. I think so. PRS have just come out with the new Mark Tremonti, haven't they? The 100, which is supposed to have a Dumble style channel. Yeah, I think it's a 3-channel amp. Anyway, we've got it in the news. We'll talk about it later on. Yeah. You've got another one, James?
Clive says Synergy.
So I don't know.
Not sure.
That's one of the 2-rock guys left. I can't remember his name.
Oh, really?
Forever. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they now do the amp build. No, they're now built over in the same place as Friedman's, aren't they?
Are they? I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
I think. Well, I've got a question for you just before James is looking at the next question. You said that Dumbles aren't really good for Strats, or not many Dumbles are. Why is that?
Not all of them get along well with Strats. No, I think there's some that were voiced better for humbuckers, especially when you look at like the Robin Ford style stuff, the later 80s. Yeah, it could be tough to get a Strat in there and really have it sound good. So, but some of the generations are great. So like one of the preamps that we use is called the Low Plate Classic, and Low Plate is usually kind of like more of a Fender style amp,
right,
which are well voiced for Strats. So yeah, those have usually like fatter mids and kind of do that like plunky Strats thing. But yeah, not all Dumble style amps work well.
So what's the Overdrive Reverb? Is that's
Low Plate Classic?
That's Low Plate. And
Yeah.
What's the other one? Skyliner?
High Plate Skyliner is the other one we use.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Now we did have a question as well. I think last week. Actually, no, it's on the video that on the review that I did. Someone said, "Can you set up an AB box to switch between the normal input and the FET input?"
You can't do that. No.
Is there and is there a reason?
The inputs are switched. So if you plug into the bottom input, the FET input won't even work. Like,
Right.
you know, I mean, you can only plug into one. The FET input is essentially, it's almost like you're plugging into a pedal before the first tube. There's a small little transistor board on the side of the amp that you're actually plugging through. So it hits the amp a little bit harder. So you can get it to break up more. Yeah, you can't. So we do have some amps that have switchable FET, and it's a feature we could add. Like if somebody custom ordered it, our Singer has a foot switchable FET, so you can, you know, switch it on a relay, but you can't do an ABY cable.
Okay. Okay. Scent of a wheelchair pillow. Scent is he's an avid watcher, and I think he said, have you ever considered seeing a guitar amp that is designed with a heavy focus on aesthetics like an audiophile amps? Some of these look like pieces of jewelry. The GF
girlfriend,
the girlfriend might like. Oh, I see. Might let me keep it in the den.
I think that's pushing to say. I mean, the one thing I'll say about, you know, the amp that Paul now has and the other one, I went, you know, they look beautiful. The brushed finish to the front plate, and, you know, the finish, they are absolutely stunning amps to look at. And the fact that you can have pretty much, you know, any finish or whatever you like is just awesome. Would you go as far as making them into a piece of like jewelry stuff, like furniture type stuff?
I don't know. We've been doing some crazy stuff lately. You know, you can customize our amps on our website with different colors and different, you know, Tolexes and things like that. But if you watch my Instagram, I'll post some stuff on there, and we have customers. Some customers will send in fabrics. We have some designers that we work with, and, you know, we'll do stuff like Blue Lotus or Paisley. I just had a baffle painted by David Bombalian, which are absolutely amazing. And
Wow.
So yeah, we've definitely done a lot of custom stuff. You know, technically, I would say most people order regular grill cloth, but we have a couple customers, you know, that really want like a showpiece, something that's really special, and you know, it kind of gives a one of a kind experience. You know, you have an amp that has skulls on it, or, you know, we did one recently of the famous painting in Japan with the tidal wave.
Oh, yeah,
they're on the boats and stuff. You know, it is fun. You know, it really pieces that stand out.
I guess that's the difference of, you know, a completely boutique amp manufacturer or someone that, you know, going to Marshall or something. And that is a difference. I guess there's no way that you know, that I would be allowed to stick a Marshall even half stack in the house. There's no way, because it looks, you know, it looks sort of industrial, while, you know, your stuff is, you know, it does look stunning. And, you know, what's your favorite amp?
I really like the Overdrive Reverb.
Yeah.
I love the 100-watt. You know, really pushing some air with a 2x12. I always go back to the Amplifiers and gain as well. I love the lower gain settings of that amp. The Marshall Plexi stuff really does like Allman Brothers and Hendrix, you know. And they all hit me different though. You know, there's days when I'll fire up, you know, I usually turn on 3 or 4 amps a day, right? And they're just random. You know, a lot of Overdrive reverbs, Wonderland overdrives. But today I fired up a Trem Drive. It was 22-watt Trem Drive, and like really felt like I connected with it. So like it just changes all the time. You know what I mean? I think sometimes it's your mood. I think sometimes it's, you know, maybe that particular amp, or depends what guitar you pick up. But yeah, it's tough for me to really pick a favorite. Same thing with like the colors. Everyone wants to know what my favorite color is, you know, at least for amps. And you know, I love them all, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the Allman Brothers, because say round Paul's today, he's got a new 335, and literally I went ba-da-da-ba-ba-da-ba-da, and I went, oh my God, that is the Jessica sound.
Yeah, it was that, wasn't it? We should talk about that. We normally do it. So there's another question from Senator Wheelchair Pillow. He says, don't get me wrong, your customizable options are incredible. Best of guitar amps out there. I completely agree. But might want a Macintosh
to hide in the corner.
yeah. Yeah. So we normally do during the show. We normally sort of talk about what we've been up to this week. So I should probably talk about my new guitar because I'm having a bit of a crisis about it, and I'll go and get it. It's here.
And I still can't believe you're having a crisis about it.
Well, yeah. So this is it's I've got a Murphy Lab 335, and I just like one time like and I'll play it and I think, oh, this is great. I love it. And then I plug it in, later on in the day and go, just don't get it.
Are you a 335 guy? Do you have other 335s?
No. So this is my thing. So I've had a 335 before, and I wanted a proper. It was a proper 335, but it was a special edition that they did with the diamond holes. So it was called the
like the Dave Grohl.
It was like the Dave Grohl, but without the Trini headstock. So it had the standard sort of headstock, and it was and it just never felt like I said. I always want like proper red 335 with the block, the 60s, the block inlays and stuff. And then sometimes I plug it in and I go, this is just incredible. And then I'll plug it in and it's just like, oh, it's quite woolly and and I'm so used to playing single coils. I think that's my thing.
Man, those guitars are so big too. You're reaching around the side and it just feels kind of unnatural, But I've gotten that way with those things too. I've had a couple 335s. I've been really excited about them, and I just don't. It doesn't do it for me. Like I just like it's almost like it's too acoustic or something. Like too much going on.
I love both your opinions. You're just wrong. I thought it was beautiful. I picked it up and went, "This is so easy to play," and we've got a video coming out, and I think I nailed it. Why? You don't always get on with it, but I picked it up and went, this is so beautiful to play. I've got a very old now Epiphone Sheraton, which we've tweaked the pickups on and stuff, and for what is now even now second-hand about a £600-700 guitar, if at the most, compared to a super expensive £3,000-5,000 335, it's not different enough to warrant the difference in cost.
No, but you have always said, but it's not a 335.
Absolutely, because I'm a guitar snob and I want the real thing.
Yeah.
And I desperately. I mean, if you said, James, I just don't get along with that. Here, take this off my hands.
Yeah.
I would have it from you in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
The moment you said, now you need to give me actual money, that's where things change. But it's beautiful. I played it and I went, I could play. If this was the last guitar I played, I'd be happy. Because I come from that kind of loving the Robin Ford stuff and the kind of Larry Carlton and all those guys. John Scofield, if we can turn the chorus down a bit, that'd be great. But, I could play that guitar till the end of time and I'd be happy.
Yeah. No, I know you're right.
But hey, as we also said, if there is a doubt with a guitar of that value, then there isn't a doubt. It has to go back.
Yeah.
Is that aged? Is it aged at the Murphy Lab?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is it's a Murphy Lab 335, but it's a demo shop. So Gibson are getting rid of their old demo shop guitars. So basically, if Joe Bonamassa comes over and he needs a 335 to tour with or whatever around the UK, it'll come from the demo shop. So they're reduced in cost, but they are like the best examples of this is the way the shop sold it to me anyway. The best examples of those guitars, because they're the ones that they want to basically, this is like the best example. So play that.
Was the salesman going?
Maybe it was, but yeah.
Taylor, you might be able to help on this one because I'm not sure I totally understand this, but I think it might make sense to you. Tim says, does he do cathode follower or a
Jose.
Jose.
Yeah, Jose. So Jose mod, as in like the old I've forgotten his Jose, whatever it was, diodes. Sorry, we should let Taylor speak as opposed to us guessing.
Yeah, I don't do a Jose mod. I thought it would be cool though to do a Jose mod to the gain channel of the Ampliphonics.
Yeah.
So I haven't even played one though. They're super high gain, right? Like wild. Yeah. Who did he do mods for?
Oh, I think the Van Halen one was a Jose.
Okay,
mod.
that's right. That's right. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Would you ever consider doing something opposed to a sort of Dumble style amp? Would you ever consider doing like more of a Vox style amp or a Marshall? I mean, I know you've done the Ampliphonics in game, but
yeah, I've been toying with the idea of doing some trainwreck stuff. One of my good buddies, Mark Kane, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a builder. He lives in Florida. Really well known for doing trainwreck stuff, and actually they're called Kane wrecks.
Oh, very good.
And so he's done, I think, I can't remember. It's a lot of trainwreck builds, like 500 or 700. It's somewhere in that realm. He's been doing it for a long time. And he also does Dumble style stuff. And he's become such a good friend of mine. I've known him since I first started doing cabinets. He was one of my first customers. And he's looking to maybe get out of the game a little bit. And he was like, hey, man, like, do you want to take over my trainwreck stuff? So I thought it would be cool. It's completely different than what I'm used to. I've built a trainwreck in the past. A couple. I built an Express and a Rocket. But they're different amps. They're dry, so there's no reverb, and they're super, super loud. So it'd be a lot different for us. But I've been thinking about that. And then, this, like the modded Marshall stuff, again, like there's so much secretism. There's a bunch of mod guys. I think Jose is just one of them. There's 2 or 3 other guys. And I have, we've got some plexi roots going on now with the Ampliphonics. And I thought about maybe doing some Marshall stuff, single channel, add reverb and an effects loop, but some of that kind of like higher gain, keep it smooth, keep it quiet. They could be fun.
Yeah.
Next one in from Justin.
Justin says, can you do a high plate in the Ampliphonics, or would you not want to? So
the Ampliphonics is that those preamps are really based off of a Marshall Plexi or a Fender Bassman. So the high plate Skyliner that we're talking about, that's more on the Dumble Overdrive Special side. So those are 2 very different amps. So no, I wouldn't do that preamp in the Ampliphonics.
Right.
Do you ever look at
one
of the Dumble style amps that you do, and then think, actually, I can see where I can make an improvement on this?
Yeah, we've definitely moved some stuff around. We've added features in different places. We've taken that kind of those great tones that Dumble amps are so well known for, and tried to put like a modern spin on some of those designs. So adding reverb, half power, putting them in maybe a different enclosure, or making amps that weren't originally channel switchers, like the Ultraphonics that I had, make that a channel switcher. So we have done some improvements, and some of the designs, like, we've voiced a little bit differently. When I first started out, a lot of the guys that first start out doing the Dumble stuff, like, everybody wants to build as true to a clone as possible. Like, how can I get the parts that are out there and the vintage iron, and like you're scourging eBay looking for a 70s Fender Bassman 4-ohm transformer so you can do exactly what Dumble did. And I feel like it's like a young man's game. Like, what are you chasing? You don't even know. Like, you're just putting this stuff together based on something you saw online. So after time, like, really being kind of in this game, you develop your own ear. And so I've definitely, kind of added my own spin to a lot of the amps. I wouldn't say that I've been improving them. You know what I mean? I just maybe put a different flavor on something.
Yeah. Nice.
I think that's it. Because, there's nothing wrong with a recreation of a classic, of a vintage amp or anything like that. But when you start to go, do you know what? I like this, but I would take it this way. That's when it becomes your own, and when it becomes, your amp, rather than just copying a Dumble. It's not quite that cut and dry, but I think it's more interesting when you start doing your own thing to it.
Yeah, so like nothing in the lineup is an exact clone. You know, we definitely have our own thing going on. You can dial in the tones that you hear from those iconic amps. The tones are there, but you know, the amps are definitely a little bit different. And you know, especially we're using, like I said before, like a lot of those old parts, like you really can't get. And if you want to do any of this stuff at scale, like you need to have, you know, a repeatable process, and you have to use parts that are available now. So that's going to change the way the amp sounds, you know.
Yeah. And Dumble didn't, as we've said, you know, they were nearly all different.
Yeah.
They were very rarely, if ever, 2 amps the same.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, even the amps that we turn on, like I'll hear subtle differences from model to model. And I think a lot of it can be tubes or, you know, component drift, like we were talking about originally. So yeah, there's a lot of variances.
Well, I was shocked with how much, because when the Overdrive Reverb turned up, I thought it was going to be, well, the amp before that I was playing with was a Bloomfield Drive, a 2-rock.
Yep.
And I was shocked with the Bloomfield Drive how little gain the Overdrive channel had, and how you couldn't actually. It was really hard to get any Overdrive pedals to sit with it, to be honest, because it just came across as really harsh. And then when I plugged in the Overdrive Reverb, I was shocked with how much gain it actually has compared, compared to, you know, when you say 2-rock, and I know it's a different circuit or whatever, but it's those sort of Dumble style amps, how much more gain, how much more versatile your amp was than the 2-rock.
Yeah. I mean, 2-rock builds great stuff. But you know, we all hear things a little bit differently. So I tried to make our Overdrive channels, you know, real throaty and, you know, very robust. You know.
Interesting.
Cool. Next.
Gary says, good day to everyone. Taylor, your story is very inspiring on how you started. Shows you how passion drives success. Well done. Yeah, nice.
Gary.
Cheers,
Boom. There we go. Next one.
Johnny Love says, in some amps, but not many, the clean and overdrive preamp can be run simultaneously, which I really like. Any thoughts on this type of circuit, Taylor? Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what Johnny's talking about. You know, I think there's some amps where you can plug into maybe both channels at the same time. Our amps and most of the Dumble style stuff are what's called cascading. So you are essentially always playing the clean channel, and then the clean like feeds into the overdrive. That's just the way the signal path works. So essentially, when you are on an overdrive channel of one of our amps, you are playing both the clean and the overdrive, but it's because it's all the same preamp.
The only amp that I can think of where you can actually play the clean channel and the dirty channel at the same time is the Sessionette. Because it's a rocker switch, and you can either have it on channel 1, channel 2, or both.
Did you have them in the US?
No, I don't think so. I never heard of them before.
Session amps were, I think it was one of the bigger music shops in the UK had them made. I think this is how it goes. They were solid state.
Yeah.
So, and the clean channel was great, like it is on most solid state amps. The clean channel was great. The filthy channel was revolting, but you could do them both together, and it was kind of cool. But
they were also covered in carpet.
Yes, absolutely.
I had a bad cat, Hot Cat 30, that I think did that, but I can't really remember. I think you could blend the channels together.
I mean, I did a recording for a session the other week, and the guitar player wanted clean and dirt at the same time. So we had a clean amp and a dirty amp at the same time. But that was because he wanted to he didn't know what patches he wanted when, so he could just literally cut it up in the mix.
Oh, wow. Commit is what I say.
You were miking each amp on its own channel?
Yeah.
Cool.
And it was quite cool because it sounded like two guitar players. You'd have your clean and then dirty when you blend this together. But we could just go, right, we'll have a bit more of this, bit more of that. And it was, I've never done it before, but hey, it was quite good fun.
Next question.
Keith says...
Keith, he said, Taylor, any other flavors beyond the Dumble style circuits? I think we've done that.
Yeah,
think
kind of, yeah.
This current model. Oh, he said, does the current model lineup keep you busy and satisfied with your offerings? Yeah, I'd like to know that. What is, if someone did want to order an amp, what is the waiting time for?
We're doing about 6 to 8 weeks right now, lead time. That allows us to create essentially anything off of the website. A lot of the wait time is based on like the aesthetics of the amps. So we have so many customization options, different tolexes and suede colors and grow cloths and everything like that. So it could take us a little while to build stuff. But for those guys who don't want to wait, we do have options that are available sooner. I warehouse usually between 150 to 200 cabinets. So that's anything from heads to combos to speaker cabinets. And we have all that stuff here fully built, ready to go. So we can basically slide in any amp of your choice. So if you want, you could basically just shop from our inventory. So for guys who maybe aren't super concerned with aesthetics, or they don't have their heart set on jade, suede or something, usually they can just grab something from our inventory, and we can fill those orders a little bit faster. But yeah, man, I don't know. We are definitely very busy. We just hired a new guy. We're doing our best to keep up with the demand. I don't think I want customers to have to wait 7 or 8 months for amps. So we really just continued to expand the team. And find ways to build things as fast as we can, but not obviously we are, attention to detail, right? Can't let quality slip. But we've definitely been trying to get amps out quickly.
So I think I know the answer to this question already, but would you ever consider having having a cheaper model that you moved overseas to be built, or you just want to keep it?
I don't know. I really love the aspect of building stuff in the US. We've got 3 guys here now, and it's just so fulfilling, giving those guys a place to work, and watching them grow and really kind of just learn a skill that they're so passionate about too. They're all playing guitar, and it's been just really rewarding. So I'd like to keep things here if I can, and we've been successful doing that. All the cabinets are made in North Carolina. All the metalworking and making our chassis and powder coating them is done right here in Massachusetts. Obviously the parts are coming from overseas, but we're doing what we can to keep people here.
Awesome. That's great.
Very, very. A little off topic, but still quite some good ideas, I think.
Jim says, would like to see a Fender ToneMaster type touchscreen integrated on the front of a tube amp, have amp modeling in the preamp section. I don't think, has anyone done? Well, that's
what is the ToneMaster type touchscreen?
So the Fender ToneMaster, if a Fender have just come out with a floor-based processor.
Okay.
That's because their ToneMaster, they've done a twin ToneMaster and a Princeton and a Deluxe, that sort of stuff, which is basically a modeled amp, but putting actually in the original chassis and stuff, but it's much lighter, etc. But they've come up with this floor-based processor, and I think that's sort of been done though, isn't it? It's what was that company that did it? Didn't Johnson do that back in the 90s or the 80s?
Yeah, the Johnson, was it the 2000 the Johnson Millennium?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So basically, but they sounded like they were from that era, unfortunately.
They had a tone.
They had a ToneMaster amp too. Remember, it had red knobs. You ever see that thing?
No. What was this?
ToneMaster? It's got to be from the 80s.
Oh, they had the grey era Fenders with the red knob.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a couple of those going, these sound great. But I also remember thinking that the guitar players that I heard with them could have played through a 15-watt home practice amp thing, and it would have still sounded great.
Yeah.
They had huge transformers, they're enormous, 20-pound output transformers. I'm not sure why they were so big.
Bigger, better.
Yeah.
Bigger
I got stuck with a couple of them. I had guys that would trade them into me, and I'd be like, "Oh, cool, vintage output transformer," and then you couldn't even use them. Ended up selling them.
What did you do? What did you do before you started the company? What was your sales?
I did sales at a company called Sprint, which is a cell phone company here in the US.
Oh.
Yep. And I got really good at that job, and that I was able to do this on the side. So I kind of did the amps on the side for a long time until the business income I was making more doing this than I was at my job.
Right.
And then I could quit.
Nice one.
Yeah. American dream, you know?
Oh, yeah. Max, he says, recommendations from the assembled nuts for a birthday present pedal or other gizmo. No more amps or guitars. Space is running low. So he wants. Go on, James. You might have to.
I'm trying to think of good gizmo stuff. I mean, so I was sent a gizmo this week that I went, that is utter genius, but it's going to make me a complete and utter nerd if I show it to you now.
Oh, here we go. Go on. What is it?
Right. You ready for this? This is because Taylor should appreciate. Will probably appreciate this as well.
I'm not sure what it is.
It's a cable tester.
Oh, nice.
Cables on one side, cables on the other side, lights, everything. That to me is handy. I should be doing there'll be a review video of this coming shortly on the other channel, and it's brilliant. It has saved my bacon already. Going, why is it not working? Plug in, plug it. Oh, that's why it's not working, because the cable's knackered.
Well, there you go. There you go. Well,
and they're about 40 quid from Studio Space.
You're right. That is very nerdy.
Yep, I don't care. So there you go. There you go. It's small. It's a gadget. It's a gizmo, and it's brilliant.
Awesome. Okay, let me just. Shall I find
review to follow? Oh, sorry.
No. Go on, mate. Go on. You do the next question then.
There we go. Boom.
Jed says, "Hey guys, a bit off topic, but have any of you used a Tonex live yet? And if so, how does it sound in a live setting?" I've used it live. It sounds great. So, have you heard about this, Taylor? This might be an interesting question for you. What's your thought on capture devices? You know, things like the Kemper and.
So the Tonex, is the Tonex a modeler, or is it an attenuator?
No, it's a capture device. So it's it's like a Kemper, or where they capture the sound of the amp. Yeah,
I have to imagine they're cool. I mean, obviously I'm an amp guy, so I don't have one of those units. But I remember like playing with those Boss like multi effects units. You know, I mean, they had like the volume pedal, and then they had like tone banks and stuff like that. And I remember sitting down with those, and it would be you could have a fun like afternoon. Yeah. You know, like finding so many different tones in there, and stacking different effects. So I perceive sitting down with the Kemper or the Tonex to kind of be that way, right? Like you can probably sit down and have a great time. But the one thing that I remember that was always really frustrating with those things was it was always tough to sit down like the next day and get those same tones back. Like I could never find the same thing. Like I felt like I would always, like lock in on something and be like, oh, cool. Like I'm stacking like this octave and chorus and all this kind of stuff. And then the next day you go back in the same settings and it just like didn't work. So I don't know. Like I think a lot of that stuff maybe overcomplicates guitar, when you can sit down with an amp. Like, what do you need all that stuff for? Like, why do you need a million different sounds at your fingertips?
You're dead right. I think every time I've done it, well, I've got two stories actually, but every time I've done it, I think, and I tend to use one sound from the processor. So, one amp sound or whatever, and then you use the effects from it. But I remember, because I used to do lots of gigs, especially around the UK, where it was a silent stage, so you couldn't have an amp. And so my setup for quite a long time was actually just like a floor, like a processor, even though I had amps at home for recording. And I went around to James's house or James's studio, where you can turn the amp up to a decent volume, and I've forgotten how great it was.
And it was, what was it? It was the what was that amp? What was it called? It was the
I can't remember what it was.
The Cornford, wasn't it? Cornford for 4x12. And you were as happy as a what in where. There was this huge smile going, there's a big speaker behind me making loads of noise, and it was great.
Yeah, because it does make a difference having having the the speakers behind you. And
so I know a couple guys that are playing real big stages. Zach Myers from Shinedown, or Clay Cook from Zach Brown Band, and those guys are all playing modelers. And at first I was like, oh, why wouldn't you want to just like play the best tube amp you could if you're playing an arena? And I think some of it comes down to like really trying to emulate the sounds off of an album where you're like not getting to go on and like doing a ton of improvising. Like you're there to play the songs that people want to hear, and you want to get those exact tones, and I think it gives people maybe in those cases that really have, the manpower to manage those tone banks and everything like that. It might give them, a little bit easier way to dial some of that stuff in, where you can get that sound exactly the way you want it off of the studio album and get to play it at Fenway Park, where you might not be able to do that with one of our tube amps,
It's funny though, but I mean, say Paul and I have been working our way through a large selection of nice amps, and my collection of amps has been coming and going a little bit, and every so often I'll get the next thing, and a couple will go to get something a bit nicer, and then another couple will go to get something a bit nicer. And I still, as brilliant as things like Tonex and all the capture platforms are, I still like playing through a real amp, because I was recording the other day, and I was that thing when the sustain starts to break up and go into the feedback, and it's like that was brilliant because it was real.
Yep.
And as brilliant as modelers are, and as practical as they are for silent stages and all that sort of stuff, there is nothing like having a 4x12 behind you or a 2x12, whatever, that's giving you the feedback between the instrument and the tone.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Fender 1960 Custom Shop says, I believe Amplified Nation is going to be revered as high as 2 Rock as far as quality and being sought after by the guitar community. Yep, I completely agree. I actually think so, because I think that's probably the case already. I would say. I think it's I think you've got the brand there, which people do go. It's an aspirational brand, like 2 Rock and like those, the classic high-end.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that building something great takes a long time, and we've been working at it for like I said, since 2009. We've had the amp line out for 8 or 9 years now, and it really even still feels like we're just getting started, but to be kind of compared to a great company like 2 Rock, that's always been one of my goals since I started building amps, so great to see that stuff.
Are you doing NAMM next year?
I'm not sure. We were thinking about going. We're not going to exhibit.
Yeah, that seems to be a lot of people saying that. I hear there's a lot of people.
We went in 2020, and it was right when COVID was just getting started. And dude, I made so many great connections there. My wife and I went out. We did a couple of days in San Diego, and then we went to Anaheim, and we did, I think, just like 2 days at NAMM. But we were really kind of thoughtful about it, and we made some meetings with some people. I met RJ Ronquillo, who's done all my demos, just a fantastic player. I get to meet him in person. I met this gentleman named Casey, who now does all of our cabinets. Which has been, he was a great connection. He builds everything to our spec in North Carolina, and those things, plus like redoing our website and having RJ do those demos, plus that like boom that we got from COVID, were really kind of what really put us on the map in 2020.
That's great.
So NAMM is great, and I'd like to go back, but it is absolutely crazy. There's 100,000 people there. By the time it's like Friday afternoon and Saturday, like the escalators are just like wild. Everyone's trying to get into the PRS room or the Gibson room. So I think if we do go, I don't think I would want to exhibit. I would probably go and try to meet some people on one of the calmest days there, right? Like Thursday morning.
Sunday is the calm day.
Yeah,
Sunday's really nice. It's the because we've had you have business Thursday, Friday, what I refer to as Rockstar Saturday, when everyone's going around with their rockstar girlfriend or their entourage or whatever, and then Sunday is the hangover, and everyone's going around. Oh, you know, but it's for me that's the day you actually get to see stuff because everyone's in a little bit. Oh, just get on and do what you know. You haven't really got to get to see stuff.
I like Thursdays and Fridays. Saturday for me is
it was too much.
Yeah, it's too much.
Right, one from Safey.
Safey says, good evening. How and why can the vintage Tweeds have this great giant fuzzy sound? Does Amplified Nation have an interpretation of this amp?
So yeah, I think a lot of that vintage Tweed sound comes from the 6V6 tubes, kind of lower wattage and really getting those things to grind up. We have customizable power levels, so any of our amps can be purchased in 22, 50, or 100 watts. So you can get Tweed tones out of a lot of our amps if you choose the 6V6 tubes. So like a 22 watt ampliphonics and gain with that Fender Bassman side, switching over to the 6V6 tubes. Oh, some sweet vintage Tweed sounds. Or like an amp like the Dirty Wonderland that kind of has, that's the Mayer inspired amp I was talking about. Kind of sounds like a super reverb a little bit, but when you voice it with 6V6s, again, crazy grind.
Awesome.
Nice. Let's go there.
Gaza, he says, hey, Paul, I totally understand your feelings about the 335. I personally believe it's a mood guitar. I use my Sire H7V mainly for mellows, edge of breakup, chill tunes, but it's not my go-to guitar. Maybe that's what it is, but that's too much. That's really interesting what you're saying, Gary, but that's too much of an expensive guitar to have as an occasional. But that's it. I love tellies. I love tellies and strats. I'd always grab a telly or a strat. What's your go-to, Taylor?
I like tellies too.
Yeah.
It's I've been into Les Paul phases before, but I always go back to the telly. So now everyone makes fun of me here because I've got like 8 Telecasters, hollow bodies. Some of them have humbuckers in the bridge or in the neck, and right now I've been playing a Sir telly with a really flamey neck. I usually like lock in on a certain guitar for a while, and then that'll be like my amp testing guitar, and I'll just play that guitar for like 3 or 4 months, and like usually until it needs a setup, and then I'll just get another guitar. But
that's right.
I got a couple Rigios that they're built in Washington State. This guy Joe Riggio, and he built me a couple custom tellies that are kind of to my spec. They're awesome. Are hollow body, so they're like really light. So if I'm testing amps, I can pick them up a million times and not get tired. Nice. Some of those custom shop Fenders can be a little heavy.
Oh, nice. Yeah, those Sir guitars just ridiculous. They're all just like incredibly consistent. It's like a PRS. You know that if you pick one up, it's going to be a good guitar.
Yeah, definitely. I like Anderson a lot too. Tommy Anderson stuff.
Yeah, excellent. All good stuff.
I'm going to put this one up because I feel I need to defend it. I need to defend myself.
Jack Lalane Jr. He said, James is that kid in school who always said he has supported the winning team every time. I don't know how to. Don't understand that.
The only thing I would say to that is, I mean, I've certainly been accused of saying that everything is brilliant.
You are very enthusiastic about everything, which is a good way to be, I would say.
But the truth of the matter is, these days, there's very little out there that's not really good.
Yeah, the crap. You're right. I think the crap gear is. It doesn't exist like it did when we were kids. Taylor, you're obviously younger than we are, but it's there was crap gear in the 90s. There was
some terrible stuff out there, and we're just really lucky that these days, with I would say I kind of sit very much on the kind of the fence between drums and guitars and studio stuff and that sort of thing. The truth of the matter is, a really cheap drum kit these days will sound great. You can spend not a lot of money and get a great guitar. You can spend not a lot of money on microphones and stuff and get really usable stuff. So when anyone says everything you review is brilliant, I say, well, the truth of the matter is that most things these days are really good. If that makes me the winning team follower, then so be it. I'll hands up. Guilty as charged, my lord.
Awesome. Well answered. Jeff, he says, is it possible to use The external control of a loop switcher, e.g. a Boss ES8, to do all of the foot switch functions on the Overdrive Reverb? That's a really good question. That I'm glad Jeff brought this up. If you have an appropriate cabling to the 7-pin plug. So basically what he's asking, Taylor, if I can just interject, is the back of your amp has got that great sort of DIN plug that plugs into it with the foot switch. Is there a way of controlling an amp switcher, something like a Boss ES8, which has got a control out, so it's basically jack outs to switch the different channels or the different functions of your foot switch?
Yeah, so there's not right out of the box, but this is a common question. So I get a lot of guys that want to use the amp switcher, and they want to switch channels and activate the preamp boost. So actually what we can do is add a TRS jack to the foot switch. So it's almost like you can just plug a stereo cable into the foot switch and then into your loop switcher and control each function. So it's people I think have called them breakout boxes. So if a customer wants to do that, it's 2 seconds. We can add a TRS jack right to the foot switch. But if you had the 7-pin plug, you could also do that. We could give you the wiring diagram and you could make your own breakout box. But the stereo plug on the foot switch works great.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. And this is referring to our two channels at the same time question, I think.
Okay, Aristotle says Groove Tubes had an amp that you could run clean and distorted channel at the same time. It does not sound good. I remember that funny looking thing, that Groove Tubes amp.
And it blew. A friend of mine had one, and it ate tubes.
Did it?
Like weekly.
Interesting.
Good for business.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they did create the tubes. Daniel Gomez says, what tube makes do you prefer to use in your amps, Taylor?
We use both JJ and TAD. JJs, we pretty much use those exclusively for the preamp tubes. And then sometimes we use them for outputs, but lately I've been using TADs for 6L6s and 6V6, which are the majority of our amps going out. For the EL34s, I'm still using JJs. And then for all the preamp tubes, we're using JJs as well. JJs have been great. All the tubes, two manufacturers for the most part, the products are pretty quality. TAD makes some great stuff as well. It sucks when the tubes go down because it really is not a great experience for people if they get an amp that has a blown tube or the tube blows. So we like JJs because they're reliable, and we like TADs because they're also reliable. We burn the amps in usually for about 40 hours before they go out to try to get some life on those tubes and figure out if they're going to blow. Maybe they can blow here. So it doesn't happen that often, but yeah, both those manufacturers are great.
Cool.
TAD's got a new product called the Red Bass. I don't know if you guys have tried them, but
No.
they're using, I think it's a factory in China. I'm going to say the name wrong, but Pissvane or something like that.
Awesome.
If it's not,
I don't know how it's PS. I don't know how you say it, but
now
they took over that factory and they made these Red Bass tubes, and they sound fantastic. So we've been using those a lot.
Can you hear the difference?
It's not a technology that's clean to manufacture in Western Europe. Just put it like that.
Can you hear the difference between like the different manufacturers and?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Interesting. Next question.
Boom.
Daniel says, if you want to raise the noise floor on an amp, integrate high frequency based processor devices like a touch screen. That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. Yeah.
Boom. Here we go.
Curtis, question mark. He says, are you guys a little
worried
starting a tube amp company during the time when digital amps are coming to their own, and even Mighty Marshall had to seek deeper pockets to look to the future? It's a good question.
Yeah, I've had a lot of guys talking about the digital stuff ever since I started doing this. It's always a topic that comes up. I'm not actually worried about it at all. I mean, I can't imagine that everyone would just be like, you know what, I'm all set with the tube amp. you know, I'm just going to go digital. Literally everybody. Like we've been talking about it on, on the stream today, like the connection with the amp is just something that can't be replicated by a modeler, by a digital thing. It just can't, you know, it's not ever going to be the same. I think there's always going to be, you know, a market for both products, and digital amps will have their purpose. You know, there's some, we talked about that too. Like there's some great uses for those, you know, especially when you're playing bigger stages, or you have to have a quiet stage, or you want to play late at night and not disturb anybody. But you know, you really can't, you can't replicate the tube amp thing, you know?
True.
Boom.
Daniel says, I'd like to see if a Chinese-made digital amp will still be working in 40 years. That's true.
Yeah. And it's different. I mean, you know, that Fender Concert that I've just sold was 40 years old and looked like it had just come out the Fender factory.
Yeah, that's a good sounding amp.
And great amp. But, you know, so I don't see why anything that's not looked after, you know, anything that is a piece of solid technology, you know, like a desk or an amp or something that is proper analog electronics, theoretically will last forever, as has been proven by the fact that there are amps still around from the 60s and desks around from the 70s and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I guess as well, it's, you know, the technology moves on with, and as Taylor said, a tube amp is basically the same as it's been since the 60s, while digital amps are moving on and moving on and moving on. So the technology is moving. All the old stuff is basically skip base, isn't it? Skip fodder.
Yeah, it's one of those on my drive at the moment, but that's another story. Blah, blah, blah. There we boom.
Johnny says, keeping it simple. Doesn't Brian May use modified boxes to keep the circuits as simple as possible? Oh, interesting. He knows what he likes and then has the amp built to sound great to be reliable. That's interesting. I didn't know. I mean, that makes sense because, you know, how many boxes have you heard of that go out live that, you know, are constantly being repaired or swapped out? And but that
I don't know what Brian May is using.
Isn't he using that tiny little thing that he clips on his belt these days?
That was awful. That came out.
It was horrendous.
That's another thing. So Clapton had a couple of a couple of Bassman combos that were Dumble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think he was playing them at Crossroads.
Oh, did he? Oh, well, there we go. Wow. Awesome.
Boom.
Justin says, I'm working with Taylor at the moment and he is responsive and very knowledgeable. Great way to conduct business. Absolutely.
Thanks, Justin. He's got a new amp. I just posted it up on Instagram.
What is it?
It's got a Wonderland Overdrive with the Blue Lotus custom.
Lovely.
Oh, I love it.
Sweet looking silver suede.
Nice.
And Jeff, there we go.
Jeff says, I agree with James. Everything is brilliant. I remember when things weren't. Absolutely.
Everything is awesome. No, moving on. Let's go there.
Johnny says, just for the info, the Simultaneous clean drive channel amp I was referring to is called the Barnett Davies 1530, based in Hastings. I've never heard of Barnett Davies.
Me neither.
They only make this one amp. Sounds great. Has great reviews. I've never heard that. It's interesting. It's not too far from where my mum and dad live, so I might go and check it out at some point. Max says, Paul, you think they were crap? You think there was crap gear in the 90s? Try being 10 years older. Some of my favorite guitar tones came out from the 80s.
I think I was born 10 years too late, because I definitely should have been a, rock and roll hero from the 80s, playing with way too much chorus and way too much delay and way too much gain.
Oh yeah, loads of fun.
So where are you musically, Taylor? Where do you get your musical bag of chips?
Oh man, I don't know. I've always just kind of been a big into the blues. I did acoustic guitar for a long time. I was kind of I grew up doing the Dave Matthews thing when I was in college and everything like that. But man, I've always really kind of connected well with Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan. really just kind of love the soulful blues and the that's been awesome. Classic rock, was big into that. When I grew up in the 90s too, and when I really started playing guitar and really kind of came into loving music as a teenager, it was right during the grunge era. So it was when bands like Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden were coming out. And, that kind of took me, when I was 15, 16 years old, or maybe even a little younger. They came out when I was probably in middle school. But I love that music. And, these days we listen to a lot of Grateful Dead in the shop. It's really great kind of background music. You can put Dead on and like just hours go by. You know what I mean? So I do that a lot. I've been into reggae a little bit lately. So yeah, I listen to all sorts of music, but I'm a big music guy. So like, I literally like almost have it playing all the time. Like, like no matter where I'm at, like there's music going on here at home, in the car, you know what I mean? It's just like, I like having it in the background.
So you say that about Pearl Jam, but aren't Pearl Jam now using your amps?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I got to know Jeff Ament a couple of years ago. He purchased an amp. We were trying to get it. He plays bass, but he plays guitar amps. So we were trying to get his amp into his, we're trying to get one of our amps into his 4-amp bass rig. So he brought a Bombshell Overdrive. I was so excited, and it didn't work out. We didn't get the amp in there. So obviously we're disappointed, but he ended up using that amp for some guitar projects. He bought another amp from me the next year, and the Pearl Jam thing kind of fizzled out. And then last summer in August, I heard back from Pearl Jam, and Stone Gossard, the rhythm guitar player, had found this 100-watt Bombshell in their kind of gear warehouse and fell in love with it. And so he wanted to use it for they were doing a 9-show run, mostly in the Midwest in September. And he's like, I want to use this for tour. So I got this like great email. It was so exciting. They're one of my favorite bands when I was a kid. They're one of my wife's favorite bands. So we built Stone his own 100-watt Bombshell. So he had 2 for the tour, and we went out and met them in Chicago in the beginning of September. And, I got to meet Jeff and go backstage and stuff. And yeah, it was amazing. It was really rewarding. Like I said, this has been like a long journey for me. We've been doing this for so long. There was a lot of late nights, putting amps together, working out in the garage, so much woodworking, and just kind of day after day after day. It was such a slog. It's something I'm passionate about, but it's still hard work. And to get there, be sitting like almost front row and seeing an amp on stage with Pearl Jam was absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
And I saw a video recently, just going back to the sort of thing you were talking about, where you were tolexing. You were showing how to tolex.
Oh yeah, you found that video?
Yeah, awesome. It was amazing. It was, yeah.
It was like a learn to tolex in 10-minute video.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my old garage. It was the basement of my condo. I don't even know what that maybe was, like 2010 or something. But I tolex a cab in like 8 minutes.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I left the video up. It had a whole bunch of views. It's a great video.
Yeah. You highly recommend anyone go and see that. It's really good. Any more questions?
A couple more. Jeff says
Brian May has his AC30s modified, normal channel, full volume, everything else removed.
Interesting.
If it ain't broke.
So why is that? Why are AC30s so unreliable? Or why do we know them as unreliable? Because everyone that I know that's got an AC30 is the tube.
I think they're self-biasing, so you can't adjust the bias. So the tubes are just like grounded to the chassis, and the amp just kind of, that's a Class A amp, right? AC30.
Yeah.
And I think it just eats tubes.
Yeah, they are hungry, I know, but that's why Brian May, not that he has all 9 behind him on all the time, is so his tech can go, that one's dead, plug it to that one.
Wow. It's a good sound though. It's a good sound.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Safety says, do amps sound better as they are played for a longer time? Good question. Is that part of the reason why vintage sounds warmer? That's a good question.
So I think yes. I think the amps do sweeten up over time. One of the reasons why we do a burn-in period when amps are powered up before we ship them out is I feel like they sound better after 30 or 40 hours. I've had some people tell me that they'll leave their amp on for like a week or 2 weeks or even up to a month and just let it burn. And
Wow.
after that 30-day burn-in time, that the amp sounds, exponentially better. So who knows? It may not be every amp, but I definitely hear components kind of get sweeter. I feel like the amps mellow out a little bit. And I'm sure it's like a curve where like it's, really apparent when you first turn them on. And then I think the changes are probably much more subtle and takes a very long period of time to really hear a difference. But I do think the vintage amps sound warmer because of the kind of, just putting some use and running some electricity through the parts.
Cool.
Michael, he said, parking bum. He says, Burns made a red special, 600 quid, worth it.
Definitely. The Burns one. The Burns one was one of my favourites because it was the first one. No, the Guild one was the first one. Then Burns did it. Then he launched his own company, didn't he?
Yeah, I just remember I used to work. So I used to work in a music shop, Taylor, in London, and I remember Burns guitars coming in, and they were. I don't think there was one good one. So
but 600 quid. It's the metaphorical cheeky punt, isn't it? Yeah,
I guess.
Johnny Love says the all important one.
Hit the like, rap fans, if you like the content. Yeah. It really does help, guys. If you hit a like, really helps.
Boom.
Philip's here. He said, I'm late to the ball game. Still loving my Bombshell overdrives. Do you know Philip from?
I do. We talked many times.
Yeah, great.
Gotta get on his show.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff says, I gave up on tube amps about 3 years ago. Since then, I've only bought 10 of them. I'm watching a live stream now featuring the guy who might build the 11th. Hey, that's what you want.
Oh, you know where to find me, Jeff.
Thing of beauty. Well, say as someone who played my first Amplified Nation today, I'm in trouble. That's all I can say. I'm in trouble because I really enjoy playing through that amp.
Yes.
Thing of absolute beauty. I think we're going to wind it up very shortly, but David is saying...
David says, really enjoyed this. Cheers, David.
And lots of love going around generally from stuff. We've very much cherry picked the comments and the questions tonight just to try and get through cover as much ground as we possibly can. So thanks everyone for your input to the show. It is always much appreciated. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Man, I really appreciate the invite. Paul, you've done such a great job. The 2 demo reviews for us, and I appreciate all the positive things you said, and just so happy to be here talking with you guys. And thanks so much for the invite.
No, it's a pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Very, very welcome. Taylor, just a quick shout out. How can people find you? How can people find the company? All that normal stuff.
All right. You can find us at amplifiednation.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram at AmpNation. We've got literally every amp on YouTube. There's tons of videos, reviews, interviews. So, yep. Take a look at Amplified Nation on YouTube, and you can reach me right through the website. So I'm here.
And I did get a question as well, actually, just before you go, where someone said that they live in the UK. Is there anywhere where they can try out the range?
There is not currently, but we'd love to find some representation over there. So we've been talking to Andertons, and we might start working with those guys, but time will tell. Awesome. So right now we're shipping direct to the UK. It's actually, we're on the East Coast of the US, so it's not very expensive. We generally ship amps within the US for $75, and we can get amps to the UK for $175. So not terrible.
And it turns up in 3 days.
Yep. And we do, we can wire them right up for 230 volt.
Awesome.
Taylor, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's been awesome. And again, thanks for taking the time out of your day. Thanks to everyone out there in YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch land for joining us. We'll be back next week, 8 PM GMT, as we now are well and truly into the darkness outside. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great week, and we will see you same time next week. Take care, everyone. Night.
Thank you.